Thank you and welcome to City Club of Central Oregon. Today's program is Transformation of the Tourism Sector. My name is Gwen Weisling, Executive Director of Bethlehem Inn, and I'm honored to serve as the President of the City Club Board. I'd like to take a moment to thank our outgoing President, Lisa Doby, with St. Charles Foundation. Lisa served on the City Club Board for a number of years and as the Board President for the first half of this year until making a decision to be closer and relocate to family. Thank you for your service, Lisa, and helping to continue our partnership with St. Charles, one of the founding members of City Club. Before we begin the program today, I'd like to make a few announcements. First, I'd like to give a shout out to City Club's annual sponsors. Without their support, we would not be able to bring you today's program. Today's live stream is also made possible by Connect Central Oregon, a nonprofit launched with the assistance of OSU Cascade Innovation CoLab. Today's forum supporting sponsor is OSU Cascades. And here's what they have to say that makes them passionate about today's forum topic. Tourism is an important part of Central Oregon's economy. OSU Cascades Hospitality Management degree gives students the edge they need to become managers and innovators in the tourism industry or to become entrepreneurs. OSU Cascade offers this major and an array of others that are in demand in our region, our state, and our world. While we're not able to meet in person, memberships and sponsorships are vital to the sustainability of City Club. Thank you to all our members and sponsors. If you watch and enjoy, please consider becoming a live stream supporter at $5, $10, or $15 a month. If you've been thinking about becoming a member, now would be a great time to sign up. And you can find out more information at cityclubco.org. Now on to today's forum. Today's facilitator is a volunteer member of our program committee. Chris Otto became the Director of Development for the Lundquist College of Business at the University of Oregon in 2014. Prior to that, he worked in the tourism industry for over 25 years. Most recently as General Manager of Seventh Mountain Resort. And during his hospitality career, he worked in large convention hotels and destination resorts throughout Central Oregon. Chris also served on the Convention and Visitors Association boards in Lane County and in Central Oregon, and is the past president and longtime board member of the Oregon Lodging Association, now the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association. So thank you, and please join me in enjoying today's program.
Well, thanks, Gwen. I had the opportunity actually to work with Gwen in the tourism industry during both of our times here at a resort in Central Oregon. So great to have her now running things at the Bethlehem Inn. When we were putting this tourism forum together, we were thinking about who are some great people that we could bring in as presenters and share kind of both a national, regional, local perspective. And so we have a great couple of presenters here. First will be Todd Davidson. Todd and I have known each other many, many years. He was appointed Executive Director of the Oregon Tourism Commission. Some of us know that as Travel Oregon, in June of 1996. And then he was named Chief Executive Officer in September of 2004. Under Todd's leadership, the tourism industry in Oregon has flourished into a $12.8 billion industry and employs over 117,000 Oregonians. Maybe a few less today, but we're going to improve that. In 2003, he helped lead an effort to establish dedicated and stable funding for the commission. This has been crucial in Travel Oregon's ability to grow the state's tourism industry. Todd is a past chair of the United States Travel and Tourism Advisory Board, and he continues to serve after being appointed to a fourth term by the United States Secretary of Commerce. Todd is or was involved in various national, regional, and local tourism-related boards and organizations. Todd.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. It's great to be able to be here with the City Club. I want to hop right in and share my screen and jump into our presentation today. And as I do so, again, Chris, I just want to thank you for reaching out and for the invitation to be able to speak to the City Club today. And I just want to thank all the members of the City Club of Central Oregon for this opportunity to come before you, at least virtually, and speak to you about the travel and tourism industry in Oregon. It's always an honor to be with David Penilton too. And so David, I look forward to your remarks, and you've been a tremendous leader in Oregon's travel and tourism industry, and a good friend of mine and a mentor of mine. And so I'm grateful to you for your leadership in all that we do as well. As Chris mentioned, I'm the CEO at Travel Oregon. It's a position I've had the privilege of holding for a number of years and seen a lot of transformation in Oregon's travel and tourism industry. So today, what I really want to focus on for you is covering some of the topics about a little history on tourism in Oregon and Travel Oregon, what those direct travel impacts are of the travel and tourism industry to Oregon's economy, talk about how we've been impacted. In fact, I would actually say the word has been devastated by the impacts of COVID-19 and the pandemic. And then what our plan is as we move forward and what we're seeing from a number of visitors and travel industry sectors. So jumping in very briefly, just to ground us all in some history, 2003 and 2016 are a couple of key years in travel and tourism here in the state of Oregon. Not the least of which is 2003 is when the Oregon legislature passed and the governor signed into law what Chris referred to as that dedicated stable funding source for the state tourism office. It implemented a 1% statewide lodging tax, and it dedicated those revenues to Travel Oregon. It also established us as a semi-independent agency, and it put protections in place over the use of local lodging taxes. In 2016, by the way, what's important about that 2003 piece is that it was industry-led. This wasn't an agency going to the legislature seeking additional funds. This was an industry-led initiative. And the reason was at that time in 2003, our funding at the state level for tourism marketing and tourism development ranked us 47th in the country out of 50 states. And for those of us that do travel and tourism in Oregon, we found that a little embarrassing. The legislature and the governor concurred, implemented that statewide lodging tax, and we began moving forward from there. In 2016, it was a legislative initiative to increase the lodging tax. There were opportunities that were seen as being available to the tourism industry in Oregon that they wanted us to be able to explore. And so they increased the lodging tax from 1 to 1.8%. That was effective in July of 2016, and then decreased to 1.5%. That was effective July 1 of this year. Of course, as you would imagine, and as Chris noted, the tourism industry responded. In 2003, when the bill passed, the tourism industry in Oregon employed about 85,000 Oregonians. In 2019, it was over 117,000 Oregonians, nearly a 40% increase in the number of Oregonians that were employed in the travel and tourism industry. Visitor spending also nearly doubled from $6.5 billion to $12.8 billion in 2016. In 2019. One of the facts that I love to talk about, and there's a reason I love this slide, is you look at the share of visitor spending. If you're in marketing, if you manufacture a product, you're interested in what your share of that marketplace is. And if you look at travel and tourism in the United States back in 2005, and that's a date, by the way, that I use because that's when the legislation that was passed by the legislature in 2003 went into full force and effect. So 2005 was our first full year of funding through that statewide lodging tax. You see that the size of the tourism industry in the United States was about $650 billion. And our share of that was a little over 1%. Fast forward to 2018, and the tourism industry nationally had grown to $1 trillion industry, and our share had grown to 1.19%. Now, a lot of folks may wonder if that 0.13% really matters. It doesn't look like our share of the pie really grew a whole heck of a lot. But what I want you to know is that with that dedicated, stable funding source at the state tourism level and the protection of the resources at the local level, and being able to work in concert with, for example, the Central Oregon Visitors Association, Visit Bend, and the other chambers and convention visitor bureaus throughout Central Oregon and across the state, by leveraging our messages, by leveraging our resources, we've been able to grow our share from 1.06 to 1.19%. And that matters because that 0.13% represents $1 billion shift, actually a $1.3 billion shift in visitor spending that would not have happened had we not been able to align those messages and grow the industry in a strategic and thoughtful way. But COVID-19 has changed all that. You look at the direct travel spending losses in Oregon for the calendar year of 2020, first quarter, January to March, down 24%. Second quarter, which would have been April, May, and June, down 75% in total visitor spending year over year. Now, Q3 and Q4, of course, are forecasts, but we're looking at being down 69 and 68% respectively. So for the year, we're looking at being down nearly 62% off that $12.8 billion number. But of course, that's not only happening here in Oregon, that's happening across the country. And this slide gives you a snapshot of what's been happening nationally. Domestic travel is the blue. The international travel is shown in red. And if you look at the change in the percent of total travel spending, you see what's happened over time in terms of how the industry has grown and responded. We're looking at a long-term recovery here, my friends. As I mentioned, we're looking at nearly a 45% decline in 2020 in national visitor spending. And we don't get back to 2019 levels. In fact, we're just actually still a hair below 2019 levels when we get to 2023. Now, in April of this year, Travel Oregon partnered with Business Oregon, the state's economic development agency, and the Small Business Development Center network across the state to understand the impacts of COVID-19 and what it's been having on small businesses and the business community at large across the state. We had more than 5,000 different businesses respond to that. Nearly 70% of those responses were completed by small businesses that had fewer than 10 employees. Now, some of the key takeaways that we uncovered from this study was uncertainty and inability to plan was the biggest challenge facing Oregon businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Think about how our knowledge of COVID-19, what its impacts are, how to mitigate its spread, have evolved since Oregon's first case arrived in late February of this year. We found 40% of Oregon businesses have temporarily closed during COVID-19. Another 2% have stated that they're permanently closed. In rural Oregon, the situation is even worse, with 45% of businesses being temporarily closed, 3% of them saying they're going to be permanently closed. 50% of tourism businesses saw revenue declines by 90% in the month of April alone. If you're interested in this full report, it's available on Travel Oregon's COVID-19 online toolkit on our industry website, which is industry.traveloregon.com. So as we look to move forward as an industry and as a tourism agency, there's a lot of messaging that we are still doing, but don't mistake my use of the word messaging or marketing for advertising, because inspirational advertising has been off the table for us for a few months, which does not mean we're not still messaging for Oregonians and others that may still be traveling to or within the state of Oregon. So for example, the beginning of May, the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department reached out to us and asked them to help support the reopening of state parks. Along with the Oregon Office of Outdoor Recreation, we were able to bring together all the state agencies and leverage our Take Care Out There campaign to be able to promote responsible recreation and to convey the important requirements, restrictions, and limitations that are on us as we're out there visiting, whether it's social distancing, use of a mask, etc. We know that there are some consumers who are still traveling. So our goal here and our marketing approach for the foreseeable future is to obviously help visitors and Oregonians have a safe trip by being prepared and aware of what the state and county regulations are that are in place to slow the spread of COVID-19. I wanted to use this example for you because it's a good Central Oregon example. Our friends over at Five Pines, great example on a business level that's clearly speaking to their COVID cleaning protocols, their cancellation policies, and how that property is suited for a trip during this new normal, as some people are calling it. I pray it's not ever considered normal. We're strongly encouraging all tourism businesses across Oregon to reference their COVID protocols on their landing pages for their website, because it is something that matters to consumers when they're contemplating their experience here in Oregon. Some of the other messaging that we've been putting out is to encourage Oregonians to stay local and to support local. We think that's an important component during this time. There are things that can be done to support that local travel and tourism industry. You've seen some of the initiatives like the Takeout Tuesdays, and also supporting your local retailers and some of these other initiatives and such. And those are very important to make sure that there will be a visitor industry in place. These small local businesses continue to thrive when we come out the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic. So a couple of thoughts that I want to be sure and share with you from a visitor perspective is how visitors are looking at COVID-19 and their desire to travel. What we're hearing is visitors still have a very strong pent-up demand to travel. They still want a vacation. They still want to be able to get away with their friends and their relatives, as do we all. But they're balancing that with their strong need for self-preservation. So that's why, as I emphasized earlier in the Five Pine example, speaking to your COVID-19 cleaning protocols, to be able to make sure folks are aware of and comfortable with the restrictions that are in place in terms of social distancing, when to come, when not to come, where to travel, where not to travel, what trailheads to maybe explore and which trailheads to avoid, and how to be able to get out and explore that is going to be part of this mix for, I believe, the foreseeable future. The other one is one that I'm referring to as rewiring travel. And the idea here is, I believe this is a way that travel may change forever. After 9/11, the federal government created the TSA, and air travel was forever changed. And I believe COVID-19 has the ability to carry the same kind of impact. Here's what I mean by that. And you're already seeing some elements of this, but will we begin seeing regular temperature checks when you're entering venues, whether it's the Moda Center to see a Blazer game, or our college football stadiums to take in a great Saturday Civil War game? Will there be temperature checks? Will there be temperature checks in order to board airplanes? Will countries, as international travel begins to rebound, will countries begin asking for proof of a COVID-19 test and that it was negative and that you had that test within the last perhaps 72 hours or something to that effect, or that you've taken the vaccine when it became available to you? And I believe many of these protocols are going to become part of the way we travel, along with, I think you're going to see an even greater increase in touchless travel. Using your smartphone as a key to get into your hotel room. This technology was already happening. I think you're only going to see it continue to accelerate. So with that, it is my great pleasure to now turn this back over to Chris so that we have an opportunity to hear from David, and then I will have the opportunity to be with you and look forward to having that chance to answer any questions that you may have as we look at this time together. This is a difficult time for everybody in our state and our nation, and the tourism industry, I believe, in Oregon is going to be defined by how we're showing up to support local businesses, how we look to rebuild the industry as Oregonians come together to help reopen in a really smart way that's going to support the stabilization and the growth of Oregon businesses that employ and support local families and communities first. So Chris, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Todd. Great presentation, beautiful slides. I'm sure some of our viewers recognize some of the areas in your slides. I do want to point out to those that are currently viewing live that there is going to be an opportunity at the end for question and answers, and use the chat function within the medium that you're watching to submit those questions, and our team will get them over to me after David speaks. David Penilton is passionate about building an all-inclusive community in the tourism ecosystem with the goal to educate and expose residents and visitors to the resources Oregon has to offer. He has 20+ years of experience with domestic and international global logistics management and is the co-owner of America's Hub World Tours LLC and Oregon Tour Experts LLC, which specializes in all aspects of a visitor's experience, focusing on unique travel adventures in Central Oregon, the Pacific Northwest, and beyond. Like Todd, David has been involved with way too many to mention boards and organizations in the tourism industry, including the National Tourism Association Board and the Oregon Tourism Leadership Academy Advisory Board. David is proud to be part of an industry that is so forward-thinking and inclusive. Here's David.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for those kind words from my friend Todd. First of all, I would just like to say thank you to the City Club of Central Oregon for inviting me to participate today. I consider this as an honor. But I just would like to take a few minutes today to share a little information about a tour operator, share a little information about the impact of COVID-19 on our industry globally, and then to share a little information about the impact of COVID-19 on our company directly. And last, just to share a few of the things that we're doing from a recovery standpoint and putting our company into a readiness position to move forward. You know, I don't know if a lot of people realize it, but the travel industry that contributes a little over $7.8 to $8 trillion to the GDP globally. When you look at the travel and tourism industry, there are three main components to it, or shall I say sub-industries, and there's the airlines, the hotels, and then there's the tour operators, which we are tour operators. There's large tour operators, and then there's smaller tour operators that are tour operators and activity companies. That's where we fall. And that pretty much makes up a little over about a million operators globally. In addition to that, it also contributes about $275 billion globally to the GDP. In the United States, I believe that's about 17 billion. And year over year, our industry as a tour operator has been growing about 8 to 9% year after year, which is actually pretty good, supporting about 7 to 8 million jobs throughout the United States. But when COVID-19 first hit our area, I did a little research, and as of March, first part of April, it was projected that at the end of COVID-19, they were looking at about 50 million jobs lost globally. And as far as tour operators, all the information I've gathered and data had indicated that within the first 3 months, 28% of all tour operators would be out of business. In the next 6 months, 46% of all tour operators would have failed. A year, they're anticipating that 50 to 52% of all tour operators would either have been out of business and or have merged with other tour operators in order to survive. So you can see just the impact of COVID-19 on tour operators. As far as my company's, the direct impact, as of February, we started making some adjustments based off the nature that the visitors we work with are both domestic and international visitors. So we started making cutbacks. I believe in February, we first laid off about 15 to 18 people. By March, the first week of March, there was another 20 plus staff and contractors in the Portland surrounding area that we laid off. Also in March, many of the activity companies we work with throughout the state, we had to cut all planned activities, restaurants, hotels, venues, all had to be shut down. In addition to that, on the Oregon Tour Expert side, which works with a lot of the larger tour operators up under their brand, all of that business activity was shut down. So as you can see, it completely has shut our business down. And in February, we had to start looking at it from a different perspective and saying, what do we need to do to put our company into a readiness position to move forward when the time is right, when the state give us, the okay to move forward. But when we look at some of the other things we've done from a planning standpoint in recovery, we first had to look and say, it's going to take some collaboration between the federal government, the state, and the different communities throughout the state of Oregon to really help to restore that trust and confidence in our visitors. And our main focus initially, just as Todd had indicated, is really on the domestic and getting people to travel locally within the state in terms of a phase one, and in phase two, moving farther on out throughout different states. It was very important to us. As a company, we knew we had to continue to stay flexible and adaptable. Our ability to adapt will really play a major part as we continue to move forward. Another thing that we really need to do was to ensure that we put safety first. Our number one priority is safety. No matter what we do in our planning and products that we put together, visitors we work with, and staff, we have to make sure that safety was our number one priority as we move forward. From a marketing and advertising standpoint, you have to understand that when you look at companies like Google, Facebook, they've got a revenue stream of over $200 billion coming into their systems. But when you look at tour operators and activity companies, we spend about $250,000 a year on advertising. And at the beginning of 2020, we had already spent that money. And so we made that investment to kick the season off. And as of March, it was completely shut down. March is the month where most bookings are finalized and the wheel starts to turn for tour operators. And it was shut down. So we've got to look, and I hope that in the future, as we get control of things more, that companies like Facebook, Google will do more to help support the travel and tourism to really get it going again. Google will do more to help support the travel and tourism to really get it going again. In addition to that, we realized that we had to be a little bit more strategic in the partnerships that we have and align ourselves with the right partners that's going to help us from a marketing standpoint and an advertising standpoint. That's why when you look at organizations like Travel Oregon, and if you look around the state of Oregon, we really make it a point to try and build good relationships with whether it be Travel Portland, Lane County, Bend, Southern Oregon, Eastern Oregon. We want to build that relationship and collaboration because we know this ecosystem is going to look so different than what it was before. And then when you look at larger tour operators, that is a key component to our success moving forward, because I am actually very happy to report to you that many of the large tour operators have already reached out and offered some support from a marketing advertising to help companies like ours to keep our feet on the ground and put us in a readiness position to move forward. I mean, there's a lot of other things that's being done. Travel Oregon issues some grants to small companies like ours to help us to survive and weather this storm. So there's a lot of good things happening. When you look at our federal government, I'm happy to report that they have extended the support of Brand USA up through 2027, which Brand USA does a lot to help market our destination. Through the work of Travel Oregon and Todd, fortunately, we have a lot of good relationships there, and I think that's going to help us moving forward. And then the other thing from an operational standpoint, we're going to really push to be a little bit more efficient in terms of what we do. We want to ensure that the resources we invest in are strategic in how do we use those resources. We want to streamline things such that we really focus on the quality of experience, because we know visitors who's going to pay a few extra dollars because of the nature of things. But the fact is, it's going to require us delivering a higher, more quality experience to everyone. When you look at an operation like ours, which was running 7 days a week, year round, with multiple departures, 10 plus departures a day, March through June were really our busy period, with the number of visitors that we're sending throughout the state. That's going to be reduced to less than half, no question about it, for a period of time. So between now and then, we really want to focus on new product development, ensuring through those new relationships and this new ecosystem, we really look to do things like, our terms and conditions. We know we got to be a little bit more flexible. We know that we got to look at it in terms of not just hotels, but we got to look at short-term rentals and other opportunities to meet the customers' expectations. And that's data that we will continue collecting data from organizations like Travel Oregon, Brand USA. And as Todd had mentioned, as far as a full recovery, I really don't see that happening until 2023, 2024. But the most important thing for our company is to be in a readiness position. We don't want to be a company who's thinking today of just how we're going to survive tomorrow. But when the time is right and it's time to open the doors to the state, we want to be there as a company in a readiness position to move forward. And we want to thrive. We just don't want to survive. We really want to continue to grow our business and in turn to do whatever we can to help within the state of Oregon. So Chris, thanks for giving me the time just to share a little information about tour operator and about our company. And I'm here just as Todd to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your business and how all of this is impacting you. It's valuable to hear those things. I'm going to skip back to Todd for a second. I want to ask you, you touched briefly on the Travel Oregon's Take Care Out There campaign. And I think there's parts of it that can be woven into how sometimes locals feel about tourism. And I know many of us that live in Central Oregon, including myself, came here as a tourist first before we chose to come here. And sometimes there's even this drawbridge syndrome, like once we get in, let's close the bridge and not have anyone else come in. And perhaps the Take Care Out There program speaks to that a little bit. I don't know if you can dive a little bit deeper into that topic.
I will acknowledge right from the get-go, and thank you, Chris. It's a very thoughtful question. And nationally, the travel and tourism industry is looking at how, for example, the travel and tourism industry has prospered, creating jobs, creating opportunities for new businesses. I've heard very similar stories to yours, Chris, where someone may come to Oregon as a visitor and they fall in love with the place, and they now are seeking an opportunity to find work here, or they may own a business and want to move it here, or they may own a business and want to expand it here. There are a number of added economic opportunities that come from visitors. In fact, one of the most overlooked aspects of the travel and tourism industry and the benefits to local is something I referenced early on, and that was the transient lodging taxes. We have a state lodging tax, of course. There are local lodging taxes that are collected across the state, and it varies by community, but and by county, they're collected at different levels. But a large portion of those funds are going to the city's or the county's general fund to help with, a variety of general fund purposes. Could be police, could be fire, could be transportation, could be water treatment, sewage treatment, parks and recreation. I mean, there are a number of local government uses where transient lodging taxes are basically helping and assisting in, first of all, acknowledging that there is an impact from the travel and tourism industry. So some of those local lodging taxes are being used in that regard. But also, there's an added benefit that the locals are not having to bear the cost in its entirety because locals are helping generate some of that additional tax revenue. One quick example is a lot of folks don't realize that visitors generate 20% of the state's highway gas tax. So those dollars that come back to cities and counties from the state, because there's a formula for these state highway funds that are generated from our gas taxes, 1 out of every $5 that's coming back to cities and counties across the state of Oregon is there improving local roads, county roads, et cetera, because of the travel and tourism industry. So I hear that. And it's important that we have residents feeling good about their travel and tourism industry because they're the ambassadors for the community. They're helping welcome visitors when they come to the community. And, you know, visitors or residents will often be the, you know, when you stop to consider other benefits that the industry may bring, it could be that concert that's coming, or that show that's coming to the tower, or that restaurant that's open and thriving downtown on Wall Street might be there because their bottom line, that profit margin that they need to stay afloat, is coming from visitors. But we as locals have the ability to benefit from it as well.
Got it. Thank you, Todd. David, I know you recently returned from a personal trip through Central Oregon and up into the Eagle Cap Wilderness and some of our most beautiful areas within the state, with cutbacks in budgets and kind of how those municipalities are able to operate in this climate with less funds. Based on your personal observation, what are things tourists can do when they go into these places to not have a negative impact on those areas so that they're welcome back in the future?
Well, first of all, I would just like to tell you, from our company, part of our procedures, everything we do is to equip our visitors with information and awareness. So no matter where we go, if there's any soda pops or anything they're drinking, we want them to bring those bottles or cans back to our vehicles and put them into the garbage can there so we can take it out and be a part of the solution. We don't want to be a part of the problem. So I think, signage is important along the trailheads throughout the community to help tremendously. But as locals, I think it's important that we just be aware that we can be a part of the solution just by whatever we take in, we bring it out. And then from a safety standpoint is that we should make sure that we're all continuing to keep our masks with us and keeping the social distance as the guidelines have been laid out, because they're there for a reason, and they're there for our safety to give us a chance one day in the future to get past this COVID-19. That's probably the most critical thing I think that we can do right now. Most of the people I observed out on the trails, fortunately, were following those guidelines and ensuring that there was proper distance. So there was a lot of respect, a lot of more collaboration out there than we would anticipate. I was surprised to see that there wasn't as many out-of-state plates as I was expecting to see, but it just shows me the fact that our locals are getting out more to travel, and that's what we want to see right now. So no different than Travel Oregon, with what little we're doing right now is with visitors or locals that's already here in the state.
Chris, if I can add to that just real quick.
Please.
the Take Care Out There initiative that I referenced in my presentation and you asked me about earlier, there is a toolkit of the Take Care Out There initiative. It resides on our industry website, which again is industry.traveloregon.com. And the opportunity there is that the messaging, the creative, et cetera, can be harnessed and amplified by businesses and individuals across the state. You know, this isn't a state level message. This is a local message. This is let's get it at the trailhead message. Let's get them, you know, let's communicate this as they're entering our community message. And that's the way it was designed, and it was very intentional in doing that. So those resources are available on the industry website. Nobody needs to reinvent the wheel here. We've tried to make it as turnkey as possible.
Thank you. A couple questions from the viewers. And maybe David, since you were recently in Central Oregon, you could start. We've talked about the impacts of COVID on businesses from a revenue standpoint and from a personnel standpoint, but as you've talked with some of these businesses, do you have any stories from Central Oregon in particular of how it's, you know, for our audience, how COVID has impacted them? That's the first question. And then the second question, kind of related to that for either of you, relates to, you know, as we were flying high, people could get really kind of tight with their cancellation policies and refund policies. And do you see that changing now that we're in a more of a more challenging environment? So those are kind of 1A and 1B on that question.
Okay, Chris, to answer the first question is in regards to Eastern Oregon, I just want to share with you, probably within the last month and a half, I've spent some time in Bend, Sisters, Primeville, Burns area. And my last trip last week, I was over near Enterprise, Joseph, Latine, LeGrand area. And the one story I'd like to share with you, I made it a point to reach out and talk to some of the local businesses there to get a pulse of where they were in terms of, from a travel and tourism standpoint, how willing they would be willing to work with us moving forward. And so that's important for the nature of what we do in terms of building future packages. There was a gentleman in LeGrand that I stopped and talked to, the owner of, I believe it was the Landing Hotel, who said to me simply, we need tourism back at some point in the future. He indicated to me that you have to understand, this is Gus said to me, is that there's a smaller gap between my father, who owns a big farm outside of LeGrand, and myself. And then there's my kids and their friends, which is a bigger gap in the generations there. And so they're more connected to the social, to the technology. And so they're looking to move out of the area or leave to go to the cities to see the vibe and what's happening there based off what they're seeing on social media. And his intent was to do what he can to ensure that within their community, they continue to build on, whether it be diversity or build on a different mix of companies, or look down the street at the college and say, what can we do to help the college to continue to thrive and to grow? So you see, there's people over there that care about the community, care about their family, and want to do what they need to ensure that they work together to break down some of the barriers to allow them to move forward. Family in that part of the country is important, but they understand that some things do have to change a little as well. And just so you know, I actually stopped and talked to a few of the ranchers out there as well and had some wonderful conversation. So I was very happy with the response that I got. The good, the bad, you need to hear it all and understand what's out there. But there's a community out there, no different than Bend and Primeville and Sisters, that are willing to work with companies like ours because they understand the value of travel and tourism to their community.
I can jump in and take 1B.
Thank you.
As you put it, Chris. You know, there have been a lot of procedures and protocols at the business level that have changed because of COVID-19. You know, hours of operation, how many folks can be inside, can you be inside at all, takeout only, et cetera. And the business community in Oregon has shown its true colors of being innovative in their response. I mean, I'm loving some of, a lot of the things I'm seeing, for example, where a community may close a section of a street so the restaurants can open up what's basically a piazza or a plaza where the restaurants can do more outside business, in bistro style, al fresco style. The businesses are also adapting in terms of saying, yes, our pool can be open, but now you have to make a reservation. Perhaps a slight inconvenience, but the pool's still open. You can still go. And now when you've got your window of opportunity. From personal experience, a reservation that I had earlier this summer, one of the resorts here in Central Oregon, where they might have normally had a 45-day cancellation policy, 45 to 60-day cancellation policy, they abbreviated that significantly because they recognized that Oregon was beginning to reopen. And we'd gone from the stay home, save lives phase to reopening into phase 1 and then reopening into phase 2. And those all had repercussions on how many people could be at the pool and how many people could participate, whether the pool would even be open, et cetera. So they were very gracious, very responsive, very hospitable in adapting accordingly. So we're seeing that pretty much across the board with a lot of cancellation policies and other policies and procedures as well.
I love that, and maybe that's a good note to end on. I think the innovation and creativity of our community as a state and in each of our individual communities is probably a great forward-thinking note for how we're going to recover from all this. And if it takes till 2023, we're going to have to be really creative and deliberate as we move along. So, boy, I really want to thank David and Todd for their contributions today. You guys are the best of the best, and thank you for taking the time, especially given your busy schedules. To close, I've got some notes to share with everybody. For September, as we get in towards the election season, our live stream in September is titled "Every Vote Does Count: Social Movements and Voting Trends." This election season program will examine voting behaviors in light of recent social movements and an increasingly polarized electorate as we ramp up for a historic election to be held during a pandemic. Current demographics, voting patterns, and activism in Central Oregon will be featured. This timely program is a must-see to inspire community dialogue and voter turnout for election 2020. Our panelists are Dr. Christopher Stout, an associate professor at Oregon State University, Nancy Blankenship, the Deschutes County clerk, and Caitlin Mylea Parker, a local activist. The moderator for this forum will be Jamie McLeod Skinner. Please watch on Thursday, September 17th at noon. Remember, if you enjoyed today's forum and you'd like to help cover City Club's costs, please consider becoming a member or a live stream sponsor at cityclubco.org. Thanks for watching, and please continue to cultivate conversation about issues that connect us all and to build a strong community. So thanks again, David and Todd, and thank you to all our viewers. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.